The wilderness has a way of holding more than we can see. Out here in the greater Yellowstone country, a place that I'm calling home for the next couple weeks, the land stretches in every direction. Dense forests, open meadows, river corridors that wind for miles without a single human structure in sight. The scale of it can feel almost unreal. 2 million acres of protected wild land, older than any of us, quieter than most places we will ever know. Standing in it, you begin to understand why people come here looking for something. Some come to disappear into the beauty for a little while. Others come because the same vastness that offers peace can also offer cover. Criminals have long understood this. Remote roads, empty campgrounds, long stretches where help is hours away, places like this can feel like opportunity. And then there are the stories that sit outside ordinary explanation. The ones people tell in low voices about things that move through the trees, or watch from the ridge lines, or seem to know the land better than we ever will. In a place this large, the line between what is human and what is something else can grow thin. Tonight we are going to spend time with 3 kinds of stories that live in this landscape. A murder that still feels almost impossible to believe. A disappearance that has never been solved. And the quieter, stranger accounts that surface when people spend enough time in the deep backcountry. We will move carefully through them, the way you move carefully through woods at dusk, aware of the ground underfoot, listening to what the silence holds. A brief note before we begin. Tonight's episode discusses a true crime case involving extreme violence and cannibalism. While the story is told with care and respect, listener discretion is advised. Before we begin, a quick break from our sponsors. They help us keep the lights on the darkest of nights. We'll be right back with your full, uninterrupted story. Welcome back. The river runs cold, even in summer. The wind moves through the sage and the canyons with a sound like distant conversation. It was in this same stretch of country, more than 50 years ago, that a young man offered a ride to 2 hitchhikers and never came home. The story that followed would become one of the strangest and most unsettling cases connected to the Yellowstone region. A case that still carries the weight of the river that carried its evidence away. This is where we begin. In the second week of July 1970, the area just north of Yellowstone still held the soft green of early summer. The Yellowstone River moved cold and steady past Gardner, Montana, its surface broken only by the occasional rise of a trout or the slow drift of cottonwood seed. The air smelled of wet stone, sage, and pine. Inside the park, the campgrounds were full. Outside the north entrance, the land opened into quieter river bottoms and rocky flats where the nights still felt empty and the wind had room to move. James Schlosser was 22 that summer. A social worker from Roundup, Montana, he had driven west without any particular urgency. He was the kind of young man who offered rides without thinking twice about it. On or around the 10th of July, he stopped for 2 hitchhikers headed toward the park. Their names were Stanley Dean Baker and Harry Allen Stroup, both in their early 20s, both from Sheridan, Wyoming. They carried the loose, restless energy of people who had been on the road too long. Baker especially spoke in circles about music, about weather, about forces larger than himself. Later, it would become clear that both men were under the influence of LSD as the day wore on. Campgrounds inside Yellowstone were full. The three of them ended up outside Gardner, somewhere along the river corridor where the trees thinned and the ground turned rocky. A storm moved in that evening. Thunder rolled down from the Absaroka slopes. Rain came hard and sudden, turning the air electric and close. In that charged darkness, something in Baker shifted. He later said he shot Schlosser in the head with a .22 caliber rifle while the young social worker slept or rested. The storm covered the sound. Rain hammered the ground around them. Thunder moved through the Absaroka foothills in long, rolling waves. In that noise and that darkness, the shot did not travel far. James Schlosser, 22 years old, a social worker who had simply stopped to offer two strangers a ride, never woke again. What followed was deliberate and strange. According to Baker's own later statements, he opened the body and removed the heart. He ate it raw. He told investigators the act was not random. It was tied, he claimed, to beliefs he had gathered from the Church of Satan, from books he carried, and from the chemicals still moving through his blood. He said the flesh gave him power over weather, over people, over death itself. In the days and weeks that followed, he would insist he had already used that power. He claimed he had brought clear skies to a rock festival in Toronto. He claimed he had somehow caused the death of Jimi Hendrix. Whether these statements were the product of the LSD, of genuine delusion, or of a carefully constructed story he wanted the world to believe, no one who examined the case could fully sort out. What remained in the darkness outside Gardner was the body of a young man who had done nothing more than try to help two hitchhikers reach Yellowstone. Baker and Stroop then horrifically dismembered Schlosser. His head was removed, his arms were taken off at the shoulders, his legs were cut below the knees, his torso was stabbed repeatedly across the chest. The wounds marked the places where Baker had worked to reach the heart. The pieces of Schlosser's body were carried the short distance to the bank of the Yellowstone River. One by one, they were thrown into the current. The water was high from the storm, cold and fast, the color of slate under the night sky. The river took what it was given and continued downstream toward the park boundary and beyond. The storm did not ease. Lightning still flickered along the ridges. The rain kept falling on the empty campsite and on the places where three men had been only hours before. In the silence that followed the disposal, the landscape did what it always does. It absorbed the event without comment. No one heard the gunshot over the thunder. No one saw the figures moving between the trees and the water. The Yellowstone River, which had carried meltwater and sediment and the occasional fallen tree for thousands of years, now carried the remains of a 22-year-old social worker from Roundup, Montana. By morning, the storm would begin to break, and the river would look the same as it had the day before. Gray-green, steady, indifferent. Only the absence of one man and the presence of two others still moving south in a stolen car marked that anything had changed. Baker would later describe these hours with a strange calm, as if the violence itself had been a kind of ritual required by the beliefs he claimed to follow. Stroop's role remained more ambiguous. Baker insisted he alone had done the killing and the cutting. What is certain is that when the three of them left that riverbank, only two walked away. The third had been reduced to pieces the current could hide, at least for a little while. The vastness that had drawn Schlosser westward, the same open country that made offering a ride feel ordinary, had also made it possible for the crime to unfold without a single witness. The storm, the isolation, the dark water, all of it worked together to erase the moment almost as soon as it happened. In the years that followed, those who studied the case would return again and again to the same details. The young man who stopped for hitchhikers, the LSD, the satanic texts, the heart taken and eaten, the careful dismemberment, the river that received the remains. None of it felt like an ordinary murder. It felt like something that had stepped briefly outside the ordinary rules of human violence and then vanished back into the landscape, leaving only a torso for a fisherman to find the next day and a confession that still sounds, even now, like a transmission from another kind of mind. The next day, July 11th, a fisherman working the river near Gardner felt his line snag something heavy and strange. When he pulled it in, he found a headless, armless torso, the legs gone at the knees, the chest opened in a rough T-shape where the heart had been. The Park County Sheriff's Office was called. By Monday, the remains lay on a table under harsh lights while the FBI examined what little was left. Identification came slowly, then all at once. The victim was James Schlosser. 2 days later and more than 1,000 miles away, on the winding coastal highway near Big Sur, California, an Opel Kadett with Montana plates was involved in a hit-and-run crash. The two men inside fled into the woods. California Highway Patrolman Randy Newton found them. In Baker's pocket were small bones, later confirmed as human finger bones, and a copy of Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible. When asked about the bones, Baker answered without hesitation, "They ain't chicken bones. They're human fingers." Then, almost calmly, he said the words that would follow him for the rest of his life. "I have a problem. I'm a cannibal." The connection to the Montana torso was made quickly. Baker confessed to the shooting, the removal of the heart, the eating of it, the dismemberment, and the disposal in the river. He claimed he alone was responsible. Stroop denied any part in the killing. A jury in Livingston, Montana did not fully accept Baker's version. Stroop was convicted of manslaughter. Baker received a life sentence. He would serve 16 years before being paroled in 1986. He died of liver cancer in Minnesota in 1994. Stroop served a far shorter term for the manslaughter charge and would later reappear in the justice system on unrelated drug charges. What remains most unsettling about the case is not only the violence, but the way the landscape absorbed it. The Yellowstone River kept moving. The storm passed. The cottonwoods continued to release their seed into the wind. A young man who had simply offered a ride disappeared into the current, and for a brief window of days, the only evidence was a torso snagged by chance on a fishing line. The vastness that draws people to this country, the same vastness that makes the nights feel ancient and the silence almost physical, also makes it possible for something terrible to happen, and then, almost immediately, to be carried away. In the years since, rangers and locals have sometimes spoken of the case in low voices, the way people speak of events that refuse to settle neatly into the ordinary. Stanley Dean Baker walked these river bottoms for only a few hours in the summer of 1970, high on LSD, and certain of powers he believed the flesh had given him. Then he left, heading south in a stolen car, and the river kept whatever it had been given. The heart of the matter, quite literally, was never recovered. Only the story remains, strange, brutal, and still difficult to place against the quiet beauty of the place where it occurred. The wilderness does not judge. It simply continues. And sometimes in the space between the trees and the water, the human capacity for darkness finds room to move. The same country that can swallow violence can also swallow a living person so completely that even the searchers eventually fall quiet. In early April 1991, the northern boundary of Yellowstone still carried the last edge of winter. Snow lingered in the higher drainages. The Hellroaring Creek trailhead sat in a remote stretch of the park's northern fringe, a place where the trail drops steeply toward the Yellowstone River before climbing again into open sage and timber. It was not a crowded trail in those days. It was the kind of place a man could walk for hours without seeing another person. Daniel Lynn Campbell, known to almost everyone as Dan, was 42 years old that spring. He lived in Big Timber, Montana, a small town north of the park. He had worked as a logger and pole cutter. He knew the woods. He knew how to move through rough country with purpose. And in the spring of 1991, he was looking for money. Shed elk antlers, those heavy bone-white racks dropped by bulls after the rut, could bring a good price on the black market. Collecting them inside Yellowstone was illegal, but the practice was not uncommon among locals who needed cash. Dan had already been into the park earlier in the season. He had cached antlers along a route that would take him north toward Jardine, Montana, just outside the park boundary. The plan was simple on paper. Walk in, retrieve what he had hidden, walk out the other side, and meet his girlfriend. On or around the 4th of April, a woman who knew him, most accounts name her as Tracy Erb, drove Dan and his 1-year-old dog to the Hellroaring Trailhead. Freckles was an Australian shepherd-heeler mix, young and energetic, the kind of dog that stays close to its person in the woods. Dan was wearing a blue jacket and blue jeans. He carried what he needed for 4 days. The understanding was clear. On April 8th, he would come out near Jardine, and Tracy would be waiting. He never came out. When April 8th arrived and the meeting point stayed empty, Tracy reported him missing. Rangers began what search and rescue teams sometimes call a bastard search, the careful checking of obvious places to make sure the person is truly overdue and not simply delayed or elsewhere. Once it was clear Dan was gone, the full search started. Ground teams moved through the planned corridor. Horses were brought in. When the weather allowed, aircraft flew low over the drainages and ridgelines. The timing could not have been worse. Spring snowstorms moved across the northern park, dropping as much as a foot of new snow in places. Tracks disappeared. Visibility collapsed. The search stretched across 7 different zones and lasted for weeks. They found nothing. No backpack, no clothing, no antlers, no sign of a struggle, and, most unsettling of all, no Freckles. In wilderness disappearances, it is not uncommon for a dog to eventually turn up. Lost, thin, but alive, or at least found. Freckles never did. Man and dog vanished together into the same silence. The absence of any trace quickly opened the door to harder questions. Dan's brothers did not believe he had simply gotten lost or fallen victim to the weather. In interviews that summer, they spoke plainly. "If Dan's in the park, he's buried," one of them said. They pointed to the world of illegal horn hunting, competitive, sometimes territorial, sometimes connected to people who preferred not to be noticed. There were reports that as many as 14 other antler hunters had been in the general area around the time Dan went in. One person claimed to have heard 2 shots. The family hired a private investigator. They pressed for polygraph tests on certain acquaintances. They believed foul play was the most likely explanation. Official investigators, Park Service, local sheriffs, even the FBI at points, found no physical evidence to support a murder theory, no crime scene, no witnesses who could place Dan with anyone else after he left the trailhead, no remains that might have suggested violence. The competing possibilities remained on the table: a fall or injury that left him unable to move, followed by exposure in the cold, an encounter with a bear or other animal that left nothing recoverable, or, less charitably in the eyes of those who knew him, a decision to walk away from his life entirely. That last theory has always been difficult to sustain. People who disappear on purpose rarely take a young dog with them and then never contact family again. Dan would be in his 70s now if he were still alive. No verified sighting has ever surfaced. What the case leaves behind is the particular dread that belongs to the never found. In a place as large as Yellowstone, a person can step off a trail and simply cease to exist in any way the living can measure. The snow covers tracks. The scavengers do their work. The years pile up. Searchers go home. The file grows cold. And still, the land keeps whatever it took. Dan Campbell walked into the park on a cold April day with a dog at his side and a plan that made sense to him. The wilderness closed around both of them. More than 3 decades later, the only certainty is the absence. No body, no gear, no Freckles the dog. Just the long, unanswered quiet of the northern boundary where the trail continues on without them. The silence that follows a disappearance is one kind of quiet. There is another kind that lives in the same mountains. It settles in after someone hears a long, unbroken vocalization rolling down a remote drainage at dusk. Something that does not match elk, wolf, or any call the listener has spent a lifetime learning. It settles after a brief, clear sight of a large shape moving across a ridgeline, only to vanish into timber before a camera can be raised. It settles over the official records, where the National Park Service states there is no verified historical documentation or scientific proof of any such creature inside Yellowstone, even as the reports continue to surface from rangers, geologists, families, and backcountry travelers. In the same vastness that can erase a man and his dog, some people believe other things have always known how to stay hidden. The stories are not new, and they are not rare in this particular corner of the Rockies. Park County, Wyoming, home to the eastern and northern approaches to the park, holds more reports in the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization database than any other county in the state. Many of the accounts come from people whose work required them to know the difference between a bear and something else. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, a longtime Yellowstone backcountry ranger named Bob Jackson described hearing an extraordinary sound in the Fan Creek drainage. He and an outfitter were riding when a vocalization began far up the valley. long, rhythmic, and powerful enough to fill the entire drainage. It went on and on without pause, unlike any animal call Jackson had ever heard in decades of patrol. On another occasion, while watching a deer bolt from a thicket, Jackson saw a dark, bipedal figure with long arms emerge and move from cover to cover across a high meadow. It did not take the straight-line escape route a bear would choose. It angled intelligently between the trees, as if using the terrain for concealment. Jackson estimated it at roughly 6 to 6.5 feet tall, heavily furred, and moving with a purpose that stayed with him for years. In May 1978, 2 government geologists driving toward the park's east entrance from Cody reported a large, dark, upright figure stepping out of a roadside ditch in their headlights. It crossed the highway in long, fluid strides and disappeared into a culvert. They estimated the figure at 7 to 7.5 feet tall and several hundred pounds. Both men were trained observers. Both later said the motion of the head and shoulders as it turned away from the light did not match a bear or a person. In July 2002, a family of 4 driving near Mount Washburn in midday light saw what they described as an 8 to 10 foot hairy biped walking purposefully along a ridge about 300 yards away. They had been scanning for bighorn sheep. All 4 family members gave consistent descriptions: dark hair, broad chest and shoulders, upright gait, moving with the slight forward lean of something climbing. The figure slipped into the trees and was gone. Other accounts are quieter and more intimate. In the fall of 1980, 2 brothers camping near Grebe Lake after a long hike heard heavy bipedal footsteps running past their tent in the middle of the night at an unhurried but powerful pace. They sat awake until dawn. At first light, they found no tracks on the hard ground, only the memory of the sound. Drivers leaving the East Gate after dark have reported brief glimpses of something large and upright moving at the edge of their headlights. Woodcutters working the slopes between Cody and the park have described seeing a massive, dark, bipedal shape through binoculars, walking 100 yards or more without ever dropping to all fours. In more recent years, the stories have continued. A former park employee has spoken publicly of an encounter in the summer of 2021 that left him deeply unsettled. Strange sounds, a sense of being watched, and finally, a sighting that prompted him to leave the job. Campers near the eastern approaches have described the feeling of something large standing just outside the circle of firelight, or, in one older account, the shock of a huge hairy face appearing at a motorhome window in the night. Online forums and late-night discussion boards collect similar reports. People who woke to the sense of being observed, who heard vocalizations that seemed almost like language but were not, who caught a tall outline on a ridgeline at dusk and then found the slope empty. In early 2015, a clip from one of the park's own Old Faithful webcams circulated widely. Viewers claimed several tall, dark figures were moving near a group of bison in the snow. Park officials attributed the shapes to ordinary human visitors or skiers. The debate itself showed how quickly this landscape invites interpretation, how readily the eye and the mind try to make sense of what the mountains refuse to explain. Whether the people who tell these stories call what they saw a Bigfoot, a Sasquatch, or simply something that should not have been there, the accounts share a common texture. They happen in places far from roads and crowds. They involve figures that move with apparent awareness of the observer. They leave behind little more than a memory, and sometimes a lasting unease. The official position remains unchanged. No confirmed evidence. And yet, the reports continue, quiet and persistent, the way certain sounds seem to keep moving through these mountains long after the people who first heard them have gone home. In a landscape this large, the night still holds room for things that do not announce themselves. Some leave footprints that vanish by morning. Some leave only the knowledge that, for a few moments, something else was sharing the silence. The river carried a body away in the summer of 1970 and kept moving. A man and his dog walked into the northern boundary in the spring of 1991 and never walked out. And across decades in the same drainages and along the same ridges, people have reported shapes and sounds that do not fit neatly into the known wildlife of this place. Accounts that the official record neither confirms nor entirely dismisses. 3 different kinds of disappearance. 3 different ways the vastness of Yellowstone can close around something and refuse to give it back. What binds them is not a single explanation. It is the land itself, the scale of it, the way the silence works on the mind, the way a place this large can hold violence, mystery, and the unresolved all at once without ever raising its voice. People come here looking for beauty, or solitude, or a temporary escape from the noise of ordinary life. Sometimes they find it. Sometimes the country takes more than it gives. And sometimes it simply keeps what it has taken, whether that is a body, a missing person, or the lingering sense that we are not the only ones watching from the trees. Tonight we have followed these stories as far as the records and the reports will allow, and then we have stopped where the evidence stops, at the edge of the known, looking out into countryside that does not lend us answers. Thank you for listening. Thank you for spending these quieter hours with me. Wherever you're resting tonight, may the dark be gentle, and may the silence hold nothing that wishes you harm. Sleep well. True Crime Sleep Stories is created and hosted by Kelly Brink, produced with the support of our dedicated team. Subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform to help us keep telling these haunting tales. Visit patreon.com/kellybrink for exclusive content and to join our community. Thank you for listening, and we'll meet you in the shadows next time. Until then, stay safe out there and lock your doors. Good night.